Hello, I'm watercolor artist Lisa Christensen, and I love drawing it with pen and ink and then creating a watercolor wash. It is so much fun, and I find these cards to be so fun to give to my family and friends. And since it's Mother's Day and birthdays coming up, I have a lot of florals to paint and to give to my friends. So anyways, come along with me in this journey. If you haven't subscribed to my channel, I sure appreciate your support, and give this video a big thumbs up. Right, let's get started. It's going to be such a fun one that I did in my garden. I wanted to sketch my sage, and it was blooming, it was gorgeous, and so I just used my Micron pens and my Caron brush markers and got this beautiful little motif. And I like to use just lines, like gestural lines. And so I wanted to share with you kind of how I started painting and using my Micron pens. To start with, here's a couple books that I love. Beginning Pen and Ink by Desiree Lee is one of my favorites. She teaches a lot about the techniques, and then she just kind of goes into her style, and her style is just phenomenal. But she talks about gestural drawings like I do. I do a lot of loose gestural drawings. This is a rose, and here's like a German Shepherd, and maybe a skull or part of a deer head. And I love gestural drawings because it kind of gets you loose and ready. Here's a really perfect example of a gestural drawing for a bird, and I just love her style. It's just so fun. So anyway, she talks about that in her book, and then she goes on to like how else she does gestural drawings, and they're just fun little fast drawings that are supposed to just be fun and fast, like this one, just to get shapes, and it kind of builds muscle memory too when you do gestural drawings. They don't have to be perfect, they're just fun. And then she'll go in, she talks a lot more about like the space and the lighting and all this, but then she talks about like the techniques that you need for pen and ink. And so this one's a value scale. There's lots of different ways you can get value and just a black marker or pen, and so this is one way. And she'll go in and be like, there's different ways to make your marks. So this is like we call that hatching. And this is another hatching, or random lines. It's also a form of hatching. And then scribbling, or like little like half circles or C's. Stippling is always fun. I enjoy doing stippling. And then here's another example of hatching, just in a horizontal form instead of a vertical form. And then cross hatching, where you're doing like little X's, and so that's really fun. And then like contour lines and how to get those, and then just different ways to make texture in your ink. And so there's lots of ways to get texture just from an ink pen, and I love ink and wash. And so that brings me to this book, Painting Nature in Pen and Ink, one of my favorites with watercolor, from Claudia Nice. And I won't go through all of it, but this book makes me so happy. So she doesn't actually outline her flowers. She uses her ink like for texture. And so that's really gorgeous. I really love how she negatively adds texture to like the background, and you can see it here. It's just a gorgeous example of how to use stippling. This is some hatching, cross hatching right here. Just beautiful, beautiful ways. And then I really enjoyed this one too. She uses a little bit of the ink to add texture to the Cynthia and to the butterfly. You can kind of see this is like her pencil drawing, and then her ink drawing. And so I find this really, really inspiring, and I find using a pen has really just been a wonderful way to build my art skills. So I'm going to share with you how I like to just get inspiration. And I get inspiration from drawing 50 Fabulous Flowers from Lisa Cogden. She's pretty awesome. In this book, she has like 500 fabulous flowers. And in here, there's 500 fabulous flowers that you can draw inspiration from. I wouldn't necessarily like say, oh, I like this one, I'm going to trace it, but I have an idea of, oh, I could do bleeding hearts, and how cute would that be? For this one in particular, I'm going to do one back in the book, but I love like how she uses her lines, and she's just very creative and whimsical. Sunflowers are always fun to do. I generally go towards like an oval shape or a circle shape. That one's fun, like a closed bud of a chrysanthemum. Anyways, bachelor buttons, you know, like that's probably not a perfect idea of what a bachelor button is, but a ranunculus. There's just so many pretty flowers. So the ones that I wanted to try was like a daisy, which is very close to a sunflower, and I like the shape of this daisy, but I like the texture of the sunflower that I saw back here, and so I will use, it'll look kind of like a daisy sunflower. Of course now I can't find it. Anyways, but we'll start, and I got a couple of fun ones. I really like to do circles. I think for whatever reason, circles like make me happy and they calm. Here's like a morning glory, and how easy would that be? So fun. So we're just going to kind of play around and get some different card ideas. I personally recommend having a garden that you can plant different flowers on. I could show you some of my garden pictures. Okay, so for this you really only need a couple things. I always like to have a pencil to start with, and I like to have it sharp. This is not a sharp pencil. I will get a sharper pencil. A kneaded eraser. Make sure it's like clean and happy and like you can move it around. I love using kneaded erasers. There's nothing better than a kneaded eraser in my opinion. So get yourself a kneaded eraser, you'll be glad you did. And then a Micron pen. I like to use the 0.5, but you can use any Micron or bleed proof pen. They make them in different sizes. This size is 0.5. I don't go much lower than 0.5. I do like a 1. A pro tip for sharpening your pencil is I like to use a eyeliner pencil sharpener. I get like the best tip that way. I have piles. I have, I don't know, 8 panels of watercolor paper that I cut. It was Canson extra large XL watercolor paper. It's 140 pound. It's perfect for ink and wash. And I'm just going to get started. Okay, so I do like to just draw with my pen, but because I actually want a beautiful card, I'm going to start with a pencil, and so I like having sometimes I will have a sketchbook and I'll just sketch out like where I want things, but I think I want a sentiment like right here probably. So I'm going to make my little daisy to be like this, right? And so I'm just going to start a circle. It doesn't have to be perfect. If you do have a hard time making a perfect circle, I recommend making a cross, and then you can just kind of go around this way and around this way, and you kind of get a good guide as to like, okay, the cross just helps you with the guiding. And I won't just make one line, I'll make a couple. So maybe I don't like that curve and I like that curve, so I just make a couple lines, and then I know that like I want my center to be a bit smaller, so I'm gonna do that. And now it almost looks like a bullseye, but that's okay, or like a Pokemon, I don't know. Anyways, it's gonna get all erased, but there's my base, and then I'm gonna go ahead, and I know that daisies kind of have this really pretty full leaf, but I don't want to get into my sentiment that I'm going to probably stamp right here. So I'm going to be very careful, but I am going to do another leaf here. That one's coming off. Maybe that one's doing that. Maybe I'll do one more just coming off. I don't want it to look too... And then I'll do another one right here. There. It'll be kind of surrounded by green, but that's really pretty. Okay. I like that composition. And now I can do 2 things. I can just go straight to my Micron pen, but if you're still feeling a little bit like not for sure if you're running to start with your Micron pen, I just use my kneaded eraser and I just kind of clean up my lines. You don't have to at this stage, you can wait, but I find it easy to just I find it a bit more cleaner when I clean up my lines, because then I can say, okay, I like this curve and I like this curve. So then when I go into my Micron, I don't have to worry about like, and I think I like that for the center. All right, I'm good. Now what I would do is I would take my Micron pen, and you could draw out every single petal if you wanted to. I don't know if I would necessarily do that, but you could. But I just kind of go at like the 3 o'clock and the 7 or 8 o'clock. You know, if you were reading a clock. And I don't like to always make the center of my petals perfect, because I don't think any flower petals are perfect. And I'll just go back in here. And I want to give it some characteristics, right? And then I turn my page around a lot. I'll go in here. And then I'll just keep going until it's all totally filled up. This also helps with muscle memory. And then, yeah. Oh, that one looks like I could fill that one in. And Gerber daisies kind of have like 2 layers of petals. And so that's kind of what I'm going for. So I am going to leave a couple spaces. Not a ton, but a little bit. Something like that. I don't want every petal to look perfect. I'm not necessarily striving for perfection here. I think the fact that it's just kind of, each petal has its own little unique characteristic makes it kind of fun. And you can see that my pencil guide really is just that. And now I can go back in and add more petals. You can kind of see I make each end a little bit different. My plan is not to I like to grow my own flowers. It gives me a sense of ownership, I guess, to my florals when I paint them or draw them. I learned that from the Anna Mason watercolor flower book. She also grows a lot of her flowers and told us kind of why, and I enjoyed her reasoning. Yeah, that looks good. I'm going to do one more maybe like this. It's gonna there, that looks good. Now for the middle part and for the, I'm just gonna, I feel like, and I feel like the leaves have symmetrical veins to them. And I think that's just going to add to the floral. So we'll do that first. Looking good. We got another one kind of coming like that. I think that's going to look really lovely. I think florals are just so much fun to paint in the springtime. Everything's kind of there. And now I still have space for my sentiment. I'm not going to mess with that. And then for the daisy, they have like little wispy, so I'm just going to kind of do half C's, and they're going to look like, they're just some texture. And I'm just adding texture. So I'm going around, and then when I feel like I've got it, then I go like over, under, sideways, other sideways, just to get the variety of strokes. And that just takes practice. I'll show you another way that that this has helped me practice. And sometimes I like to go out of the line because it didn't look quite right for whatever reason, and I'm okay with that. Like, it's my art. I gotta do what I want. But I think that's going to look really pretty. And then I like the white space right there. I'm going to keep it very light. And then I'm going to take my kneaded eraser. This is why I love it. I can just erase all those lines. And I don't get the messy eraser stuff. And so I enjoy drawing flowers. If I'm making a bunch of cards for like birthdays or, you know, all occasion cards, I will often buy a stamp. But there's nothing better than drawing something really really lovely and simple. And I see that I missed an ink line right there. Or it looks like I missed it. I don't know. But there we go. Yeah. You just want to, so there is that, and then I would just watercolor it. In just a second I will watercolor it. But for now, I'm happy with how this is. Alright, let's make another different floral. This one, alright, another favorite one of mine is like a 5-petal flower. Sometimes they're roses, sometimes they're like, I mean, any 5-petal flower. They're so popular, and you can like doodle with them like around, you know, like you can make like 3 or 4 or 5 different ones around the edges. For this one, I'm still going to keep it simple for you guys, and I'm just going to, again, kind of map out. Maybe I will do a couple different ones, but so here's my middle circle, and then I'm still going to do another circle in the middle, and you're going to see how not fun of a circle drawer I am. But that's okay. I'm getting my circle just so. Alright, so there's a good one. Let's make another one right here. We'll just do like an overlap. We'll do like a composite, or like a little arrangement, a floral arrangement. I decided that I wanted the circle to be a little bit over this way. Oh, that's going to be really pretty. And I think I might leave it this way, and then I'll have my sentiment like right here. I always like to kind of just draw in my sentiment there. I think that's going to work. And then I feel like the little circle flowers, you know, they can be kind of like heart-shaped leaves. Maybe it's a stylized version of a petunia leaf. I don't know. Petunia leaves kind of have a more of a oval look, but I like the shape of like some heart-shaped. So I often will do that. That's going to look really pretty. And I know I'm going to need a leaf over here, so I'm just going to draw that in. We'll make another one like this. And there's, so we got some cluster of leaves happening. I'll probably do another leaf like this. Something to that effect. I feel like this is,
And I do play with my shapes a lot. I'm not usually happy with the first line that I do. Sometimes I will use my eraser. I don't always like to, but I like to get there. I feel like I'm really struggling with that shape for whatever reason. Yeah. There, something like that. I think that's going to look quite perfect. And now I'm going to show you kind of how I want. My petals are going to look very much like my leaves. So they're going to look like this in the middle of the flower. They're going to look kind of like this. And then sometimes they might be curved. So then I'll do a little curved thing like that. And I will often like move my color, but that's kind of the, sometimes I like to, whatever shape my leaf is going to be is kind of the shape my petal is going to be. Yeah. And then I might even just add a little bit of line to it. Now the watercolor paper is textured, so if you press harder, you're going to get a smoother line. If you press lighter, you're going to catch the texture of the watercolor paper, which I really like, especially when I'm doing something light and I'm just doing a lot of texture. I'll just go in over my ink, and then wherever I want it to be thicker, I just, you know, add more pressure to my pen and I get that. So that's kind of fun. But anyways, all right, ready to start. I got a good composition happening. And we're just going to start. Sometimes I will put a dot right there, and a dot here, and a dot here, and we're just going to go with it. And then for five, I kind of like to go like 12 o'clock, 3 o'clock, or 12 o'clock, 6 o'clock, 9 o'clock. And then sometimes I have to make it into a 6-petal flower just to make it work, but we're gonna hope not. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And then I get to decide how I want my I think I'm gonna just do a couple little stamens. Kind of reminds me of like a beach or ocean vibe. Now you could always add a little bit more, but we're gonna go with it. We're just gonna keep going with it. Now I like to make my leaves, and I feel like this is again gonna be symmetrical. I think veins and leaves are mostly symmetrical. Sometimes you find them in nature that they're not. All right. So again, here's my 3 o'clock. There's my 6 o'clock. Or yeah, 3 o'clock, 6 o'clock, 9 o'clock. That one's going off the paper apparently. Now this one's going to have to be a 6-petal. I don't make my petals big enough, but I don't, only you're going to notice. Unless you're giving this to a botanist and they ask you what flower it is, you're going to be like, it's a 6 and a 5-petal flower. Isn't it pretty? And so I had my leaf going this way, but I'm going to have to make this leaf go a little bit longer like that. So even though in my mind I had something planned, it doesn't always happen. And I'm okay with that. That works. And maybe I will just do a little, like, something in the middle. I felt like the middle needed something. That looks better. Once I get my flowers all done, I will probably go in and add just a little bit of line work to it. I call this like my gestural drawing, just because I want my drawing to be kind of the focus, and then the wash is just secondary to it. Yeah, I'm already seeing that taking shape, looking much lovelier. I think the funnest thing about ink is that you can really add a lot of texture and shape just with a little bit of vision and technique. I don't know, maybe these are like, they're just fun. Alright, and now I got 2 more leaves. I'll probably do a leaf like this. That may or may not work. I'm gonna have to connect this. There we go. That will work. I think all my leaves are going to be symmetrical. Yeah, that's pretty. Sometimes I think the foliage is just as important as the flower. Had a student ask me, how do you get such smooth lines? And I said, well, you just make the smooth line. You don't think about it too much. You just do it. Once I put my pen down, I'm kind of committed. And if I don't like it, that's okay. It's just a pen and it's just a card. It's supposed to look beautiful and whimsical, and I don't know. So anyways, I found that to be really kind of inspiring. Okay, to make your leaves, your petals bigger, instead of starting like where you stopped, you just go a little bit further, and then sometimes I go out of that circle, which I just did. I'm okay with that. This flower is going to go off the page. I think I can just do a 5 petal right here. Woohoo! Yes, I can. And then I really like this flower leaf going like that, and just I love it. Alright, let's make these little petals look more I'm loving those. And then I just did a little like curlicue, half C's or circles. And then these beautiful little stamens. I think they're stamens. Anyways, oh, how perfect. Alright, I was going to do one more leaf right like this, and I do like how that shape is turning out to be. There. Oh, that's so pretty. I think that's just gorgeous. It reminds me of very island, very tropical. And now I can take my eraser and just erase. I love kneaded erasers. And then it looks like you just did it. You just did it effortlessly because you had those guides. So pro tip for doing line work is once your pen is committed, you're just committed. Once your pen is down on the paper, you're committed. Don't think about it, just do it. You already have the guides made, so it should be simple. And if you do stop midway through the line because you're like, oh, that didn't quite look right, no one's gonna notice. Now if you were doing like something for like an art gallery, that's when you want to have lots and lots of practice, and that's why artists will have sheets of paper right next to them so they can be like, okay, if I need to draw a petal of whatever, okay, let's make a couple of these. Which ones do I like the best? You know, and then they'll be able, okay, well, I like this one. This one turned out, okay, well, let's remake that. Okay, that's almost perfect, you know, so we practice a lot before we actually do the do the actual art itself. So anyways. Alright, so we did a 5-petal flower and a daisy. This is a circle flower. This would be considered a star flower, like a star-shaped flower, and I didn't really actually go over the star shape, so I'm going to make a bigger star-shaped flower. I'm going to start with my circle right here. And then maybe I'll make my bigger circle here. I'm just trying to get the right shape. For whatever reason, this is not happening. So, there's my cross. And I like this one. And so I'm looking at the spatial relationship between like this piece and this piece, and that looks good, but then here doesn't. And so I think I'm just going okay. There we go. That's better. I think that will work. Okay. I got my circle happening. Maybe it's a little bit off. Probably needs to be more like that. I say take your time getting the shape of the flower right, so then when you start composing it's easier. It's kind of like writing. If you don't have a good outline, then your writing is going to suffer, right? And same thing with our shapes. If we don't have the right bones down, we don't have the right outline down, then our shapes are going to suffer throughout the whole process. So, alright, so let's do, like, so here's another way. There's the star, there's the start of the star, and then we'll do one like this and one like this, and this is just our guide. Sometimes I think it's easier to have the guide first. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So there's a 5-petal star flower, and what you can do then is, now that you have this kind of vein started, you can whoosh, and it's just a much easier process. That one might go out, that's okay. There's my dot. Something like that. Let's see, I probably want my end to be there. And then there we go, we got our star shape. I want to make this kind of rounder, more dramatic. There. Now I can go in and just erase that circle. Reminds me of like a big lily or something. But that's another way to make. And you don't want to make your curves too curvy. You don't make your petals like, you know, too curvy. Just a simple, like, leaf. Okay. Maybe this is, we're gonna call that good. I think I'll start right here. The best thing about pen and ink is you can really own your lines. If you're not comfortable with using ink, just practice. Do your letters in ink, just stroke drawings in ink, and that is what's going to help you the most. So I see that my circle probably needs to be more like this. So I'm going to erase and redraw it just so I can see if I think it needs to be somewhere else. And I think so too. I think this could be like a hibiscus. I could have not had the points and just done a like almost like a flat, and that would have been a hibiscus, and that would have been really pretty. I'm just kind of doing like these cross hatching just to see what I like. I think I do like that. I must be in a tropical mood. Something to that effect. And now we can go in and just kind of add what I like to call detail. And I'm very lightly, like I was very sure of my lines here, and this I'm not as sure. Not that I don't want to be, I am, but I'm just adding a little bit less pressure. And that helps with the texture. It just gives it a new characteristic. I go with the line. And then I just add some of that texture. So I'm going to go with the line that I created for the petal. I'm going to do that on the other side too. And I already see kind of a line, so I'm just going to go with that line. And then in the middle of the 3 lines, I just add a little bit more texture. There. And now I still have maybe a spot for a sentiment right down here. Alright. Alright, for this one, I wanted to do like a pansy. A pansy. And so I'm still going to do, they're almost more like a, they're still 5 petals, but they're more almost like a oval than anything. I mean, kind of an oval. So we're just going to kind of make our little oval. That might work. This might be about right. And I'm gonna make my little center. This is my yellow. Usually pansies have like a yellow or an orange center. And it's kind of fun because you have like these petals that kind of, like there's 3 petals. There's 1, 2, and then 3. And the third one kind of goes out like this. So I'm going to make my lines like this. And then I'm just going to kind of, I really like the pansies. I like the texture that it comes with. Sometimes, like, you can get some really fun inking done. But I do feel that this one line isn't quite right, and that's okay. So I'm going to just I map things out a lot. And then sometimes I just have to kind of draw like a line and be like, okay, I know that this angle is right, and I know that this angle is right, so now there's my line for that one. And then I know that this one, and of course I like to sometimes draw out of the line just to get a good shape. Like, this is just preliminary, really. I like how it, and I decided that I wanted it to kind of, this petal to curve in on itself a little bit. So that's kind of pretty. And then this one will just curve like it should. And then it kind of, again, I'm going to use my lines and be like, okay, that's where it should like start to come out at. Sure. Yeah. And now my picture has this kind of overlapping this, so it's kind of a big a big one. And then this one just kind of does its own little thing like this, something like that. And then there's my pansy, or my Johnny Jump Up. I call it a pansy. I think it depends on the color. I don't know the difference between a pansy and a Johnny Jump Up, but I know that that's a good start. I also know that I did not leave enough space in between. So when I'm designing, I could just say, okay, erase the whole thing and start over again. Or when I'm ready to cut, I'll just cut off a 1/4 of an inch right here, and that should make it a bit more centered. I also thought that, you know, like I could also cut it down like here too and make it into a square card. So there's a lot of different options I can do, even though my intentions was to be in the center. It didn't actually happen, and I'm okay with that because I'll just trim it down, mat it, whatever, to make it work the way I want it to. So there is that. Alright, I'm not going to erase my lines until after my pen work is done and my pen is ready to go. Of course, I am going to start here, and I'm just going to kind of, I feel like the edge is probably the funnest part to draw. That looks lovely. And this one, Whoosh. There we go. This one's a fun one too. There's my edge. I kind of want it to be a little bit ruffled. I'm going to go into there, but I'm also going to add my little fold-in right in there just to give it some differentiate the two petals. It needed some yeah. And then one more. And that's how I would draw a pen. Now, what I can do is I don't actually want to draw a circle in the middle. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to cross hatch where I think the middle of this yellow is. And there's, in the picture that I have, it kind of has this like little point. So it's almost like a triangle. But not. And then I can go in with my and this one actually, like, they kind of V off. That's kind of pretty. I love growing my own flowers because I can take pictures of it and then I can reference them later. And then this one, this is all very violet, and so they have this, the center one, it just kind of V's off like that. So pretty. And then here's another one, and that kind of V's off, but not as much, so I'm not going to do as much. And then here's one here. And it doesn't actually V off, but I feel like it should, so I'm going to just do that. This one has like 5, and there's one that goes like just all the way down, but it doesn't actually like V off. This one does. And they're only on like one side, so that's pretty too. It kind of gives, and then there's one more right here, and again it goes off of one side. Doesn't have to be totally correct, I don't think. That's not the plan. Alright, and then this is just really light. Like you barely see it, but it's there, and they just have these beautiful lines kind of going out. So I'm just going to add that to it. So I recommend having your own source photos always. So you can become the artist you want to be. And then this one actually doesn't have a whole lot, but I'm just going to take artistic license and add some of it. And I'm okay with that. There, that's so pretty. And then the leaves have these like little jaggedy, like they're just little ovals. Like that. And they are symmetrical, meaning on both sides there's a vein that meet in the middle, symmetrical. And I'm going to erase the pansy. I don't really need that. It's going to be in my way. Something like that. And I still want to have a sentiment right here, so I'm going to leave it alone. And actually, I don't think I will cut it because I like the leaves. And I think that's going to be really pretty. I think when I put color down, it's going to look really lovely. And so there we go. There are some beautiful florals. And when I come back, we will put some ink to them. Alright, so I got this beautiful set of Paul Rubens Artist Watercolor. I really truly love this. This is just beautiful. The watercolor is beautiful. I just love it. And so I actually have like a little color swatching of different triads that I've chose that will help me decide when I'm painting what I love. But I love some of the granulation from this Colbalt teal turquoise, and I used it a lot, but I'm just gonna do some fun. I love this maroon. Will be really pretty for the daisy, and I'm gonna do like a Indian yellow for the center. I think that's gonna be really pretty for a couple things. I'm also gonna need cadmium yellow right here for the violet. I'm gonna use some purple. And they have a good dioxazine purple right here, so I'll use that for the like the Johnny Jump Up. And let's see, I also like to always pair the purple with like a cobalt turquoise blue, cobalt blue, so that will work together. And maybe I'll do like an orangey-ish color. I might just try this Quin Violet. Sometimes when I don't know, I like to just play with a new color. So we'll do that. And then for greens, the cobalt turquoise would be pretty, I think, with sap green. So we're going to do those two greens. Alright, so I cut down my cardstock. I mean, the same as it was, but it's 4 1/4 by 5 1/2. And right now I'm just going to start kind of an underpainting. And I'm going to start with this blue. And then I'm going to start with this green.
So as I start with the underpainting, I'm just going to have this green and blue mix, maybe with a little bit of yellow, that cadmium yellow. And I'm just going to go around the daisy. It's pretty thick. It's kind of like a milk-like consistency. It will dry a shade or two later. But I wanted to get some good pigment on the page and with lots of water so the pigment can move around and just be loose and fluid. And so that's what you see me here doing. And I am trying to get into, like, I'm trying to get the lines in good shape. And then with a good wash around the whole daisy. And I will do that for every single. While I'm painting my background, I'm going to put on some soft music. I just wanted to, really what I'm doing is going around with a medium wash of thickness of water to pigment ratio, so it's just a nice little milky consistency. I can see the white of the paper, but it's not thick like straight from the tube. as I am painting, this technique where I am painting over the first wash is actually called glazing, and you'll see me doing that a little bit to all the leaves, and then I'm actually just lifting up some of that watercolor, and then I'm adding like a little bit more of that blue in. It's just a fun technique to kind of make it look loose and fluid. And so the same thing with this daisy. The daisy, I put in a little bit of yellow, and now over the leaf I can just kind of paint over it, and I still get that yellow look, but it's just not as vibrant, and that's called glazing. And glazing is something that watercolor artists do all the time to get darker darks and to really get that contrast that we like. And so that's what that is, and it's really fun. And sometimes I can add, you know, like a variegated wash like I did to that leaf. I added a little bit of yellow green, and now I added a little bit of blue green just to give those leaves a little more of a variegated wash and glaze to them. You see how I do that on one side of the leaf. All right, that looks perfect. I'm going to do that same thing with this leaf as well. Alright, so for the clematis, I like to flood the area, and so I just wetted the area, and now I'm adding some of that dioxazine purple just on the edges, and I'm going to do that to every single petal, and then the effects that you get are just lovely. And so it takes a little bit of patience and a whole lot of work, but it's worth it in the end because it looks so pretty once it's done. the Tailored Expressions Pin It Pin. They're just a great sentiment stamp set. And I'm just going to ink those in black with the ink that will match. Anyways, if you found this video to be at all helpful, please like and subscribe to my channel. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope you get your fingers inky and watercolored on them. Thanks so much for watching, you guys. Have fun painting.